Hello everyone, my name is Ryan Cam, and this is a time for celebration. Not only are we at the halfway point on the AFI's Top 100 list, but today we're going to be talking about The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. This was directed by Peter Jackson, we all know who he is, and this was the first movie of the greatest trilogy of movies that have ever been made. If I seem a little more chipper than I am usually, it's because The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring is one of my all-time favorite movies. I love all three Lord of the Rings movies equally and wholeheartedly, but Fellowship of the Ring is just among my favorites. That and Return of the King. I was personally hoping that all three movies were on the list, but unfortunately they are not. I was thinking of doing maybe a cheat where I talked about all of them and just have 2 and 3 on as like bookends or something like that, but again, I have to follow the list, so I'll just have to say I'll cover the other Lord of the Rings movies But before I go any further, I just want to say that I will be talking about the extended edition, which is what I have right here. The extended edition, and I'll also be going into full spoilers here, but this movie was released in 2001. If you're one of the 2 people that have never seen Fellowship of the Ring, leave now and go watch it, because it's excellent. So with all that out of the way, let's dive in. The movie opens with a great narration from the Lady Galadriel, played brilliantly by Cate Blanchett, who basically lays out everything leading up to the start of this movie. In the Second Age of Middle-earth, the wizard Sauron gave rings to all of the races of Middle-earth. 3 rings were given to the elves, 7 were given to the dwarves, and 9 were given to men. But in secret, Sauron cast a magic ring, the One Ring of Power, which only he could control. And into this ring, he basically poured all of his malice and contempt for all things living. And with this ring and his army of orcs, he nearly took over all of Middle-earth. His only stepping stone was an alliance of men and elves led by the great king of men, Isildur. As well as the elf lord Elrond, we cannot forget about him. But Sauron's defeat was only a physical defeat. His spirit continued to live on in the ring. The ring is essentially alive. And until you destroy the ring, Sauron will always be there. It's a creepy thought. And the ring causes the death of Isildur, whose lust for power consumes him and leads to him being murdered by some orcs. And the ring escapes capture for about 1,000 years, until it is found by a hobbit named Smeagol, who later transforms into the creature known as Gollum. The ring basically destroys Gollum's mind and turns him into just a deformed creature. Not even a hobbit anymore, just a thing in every sense of the word. And then 50 years before the Fellowship of the Ring begins, the ring is found by someone else, a hobbit named Bilbo Baggins. And the movie begins where we see Bilbo on his 111th birthday. He's played by the late Ian Holm, may he rest in peace. He is excellent in all of these movies. And in this little bit where Bilbo begins narrating, we learn just about the life of the hobbit. It's not too exciting. They basically live in their own little corner of Middle-earth. They don't bother anyone else, and so far no one else has bothered them. Their only real passions are drinking, smoking weed, and eating. And I know they call it fancy names like Old Toby and all that, but it's weed. Let's just call it what it is. And Bilbo only has one family member he truly cares about, and that is his nephew, Frodo Baggins, played by Elijah Wood. Bilbo plans on leaving Middle-earth for good and leaving everything to Frodo. As a matter of fact, Bilbo plans on leaving immediately after his 111th birthday, in which, among many of his family and friends attending, is his dearest friend, Gandalf. Gandalf is played by Ian McKellen, and if there was ever a perfect casting choice for this movie, I have yet to see it, because Ian McKellen is absolutely wonderful in all of these movies. Even his entrance is epic when Frodo sees him and runs over to Gandalf and meets him there. And Frodo says, "You're late." And Gandalf says, "A wizard is never late Frodo Baggins. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to. But Gandalf is not just coming over to celebrate Bilbo's birthday, he also has some business to attend to. Because Gandalf knows that Bilbo has the ring. Don't ask him how, he just knows. And well, there are some inquiring parties looking for the ring. To make a long story short, some orcs found Gollum and tortured him until Gollum said 2 words. Shire, Baggins. And so when Bilbo just ups and leaves, leaving the ring behind him, and Gandalf had to basically twist his arm to do that, Gandalf gives it to Frodo and says, do not touch this ring in any form or fashion. He locks it in an envelope, and he says, keep it secret, keep it safe. Then Gandalf goes, does some research, and comes back and tells Frodo that he has got to leave, because, well, those inquiring parties are coming to the Shire to take out Frodo and take the ring. Those being the Nazgul. Remember when I said that Sauron gave 9 rings to the race of men? Well, those 9 men basically turned into Sauron's witch slaves, for lack of a better term. They're not even men anymore. They're just demons who wear black hoods and ride on black horses. They have one goal, find the ring and bring it back to their master. That's where it begins and ends with them. And they're some of the scariest parts of these movies. So Frodo, taking the hint, leaves, but he doesn't travel alone. Instead, he has his trusted friend, Samwise Gamgee, played brilliantly by Sean Astin, accompanying him. Oh, and they also have 2 other companions, Merry and Pippin, join them, played by Billy Boyd and Dominic Monaghan. While the hobbits leave, Gandalf goes off on his own mission to find out what's going on with the Nazgul. He goes to his, I guess, friend or mentor, named Saruman, played brilliantly by Christopher Lee. But he essentially made his name playing Dracula for the Hammer Dracula series, and was Count Dooku in Star Wars. Essentially, the 2000s were a very busy period for Christopher Lee. And if there was ever a perfect casting choice than Christopher Lee as Saruman, I just don't know of it. He makes this role perfect. He has the voice. Sauron's forces are already moving. The 9 have left Minas Morgul. And Gandalf soon realizes that Saruman hasn't been too honest, and Saruman is in cahoots with Sauron. I mean, Gandalf should have figured it out. I mean, Sauron, Saruman, they're like similar names. While all of this is going down, the hobbits make their way to this town called Bree, where they go to this bar called the Prancing Pony. And yeah, this is totally a bar that would be named the Prancing Pony. I mean, it's just other than like the Devil's Horse or something like that. But while they're there, they find an unexpected ally in the form of Strider, who would later be known as Aragorn, played brilliantly by Viggo Mortensen. Aragorn is the last heir of Isildur, the King of Man who slain Sauron. But to make a long story short in there, I'm going to be saying that term a lot, to make a long story short. Aragorn basically gave up his role as the King of Men to go out on his own, because he simply said, I want no part of that. And he's basically like the Mandalorian. He's a bounty hunter for hire, but he recognizes Frodo and he's like, come with me if you want to live. But soon afterwards, the Nazgul catch up with them and they attack the hobbits, and they injure Frodo, but not before Frodo pops on the ring. And we come to find out that the ring can turn someone invisible. Not only that, but it is very addictive. And when Frodo gets stabbed by one of the Nazgul, it is not good news. Because according to the movie, once you get stabbed by a Nazgul's blade, you only have like minutes to live. But just when things are starting to look grim, a saving grace comes in the form of Arwen, played by Liv Tyler. She is the daughter of Lord Elrond, like I mentioned, like the other half of the duo that slain Sauron the first time around, and she is an immortal elf. And she helps the hobbits and Strider back to the elf kingdom of Rivendell. But not before taking out the Nazgul with a very clever water trap. Like, seriously, it's one of the best scenes in the movie. Where Gandalf is there after surviving his encounter with Saruman, and Lord Elrond, who is the King of the Elves. He's played by Hugo Weaving, and yeah, that's a perfect casting choice right there. That's like 3 or 4 in a row. Oh, and I forgot to mention, not only are the hobbits and Gandalf in Rivendell, but there are also some pretty key players here as well. Aragorn has joined them, the elf Legolas, who pretty much has like perfect aim with a bow and arrow, Gimli, who represents the dwarves, and most important, at least in this movie, Boromir, played by Sean Bean, and also represents the race of man. He is the eldest son of the Steward of Gondor, which is the last stronghold of the Kingdom of Man, and he knows it and is very arrogant about it. But now that everybody is in Rivendell, there is a decision that needs to be made regarding the ring. Because essentially, the movie does a great job of showing that this ring is near indestructible. There is a way. It is not easy, but there is a way to destroy this ring. The only way to destroy it is to walk this ring into the layers of Mordor, which is where Sauron lives and is the most evil place in Middle-earth, and walk it into Mount Doom, where the ring was created, and drop it into the lava. And I cannot stress this enough, folks, it is a lot easier said than done. And while discussing the power of the ring, he basically straight up says, you know, what if we just use it against Sauron? I mean, it's his weapon, won't he be defeated by it? And you would think that's a good point, until Gandalf shuts it down immediately by speaking Mordor, the language of Mordor, in Elvish tongue. And it triggers absolutely everybody, and Gandalf basically has the look of, I'm not apologizing for that, but if we use this ring, then that language is going to be everywhere. Our only option is destroying this thing. And with all of that out of the way, Frodo basically says, the ring is my burden, I will take it. But everybody else chips in to accompany him to Mount Doom, and the Fellowship of the Ring is born. And before they all set off to Mount Doom, Bilbo gives Frodo a last couple of presents. The first is this armor, which is called Dragon Scale or Dragon Lace. I can't remember it off the top of my head. And then he gives him a sword, which is simply known as Sting. And yeah, things named Sting tend to be really, really successful. And through a series of rather unfortunate events, they find themselves in the mines of Moria, where the dwarves have long since departed, in a pretty heart-wrenching scene with Gimli. One of his best scenes, in my opinion. But something else is living in those mines, and it just happens to go by the name of the Balrog of Morgoth. And sweet Jesus, this thing is terrifying. Basically, when you think of the devil, this image immediately pops into your head. But in essence, Gandalf basically falls on the grenade for everyone and says, everybody back up, this is mine. And basically basically fights him off and then utters the line, "You shall not pass!" Slams his stick and takes out this entire bridge. But the Balrog has a whip and takes Gandalf down with him. Followed up by one of the greatest no's in movie history ever. After all of this takes place, what's left of the Fellowship reaches Lothlorien, which is the other big elf stronghold, which is where the Lady Galadriel lives. In a scene that still haunts my nightmares to this day, Frodo basically says, "Hey, Galadriel, if you're so wise, then why don't you take it?" And Galadriel basically says, "And you shall have a queen, and all shall reign in despair." And I'm not doing it justice. It's some of the scariest stuff that I've ever seen. Like, Galadriel turns into a film negative, her voice becomes distorted, and you just know that, okay, giving her the ring is not a good idea, because she is all-powerful in this world, and she will use that for evil. The Fellowship leaves, but not without one parting word from Galadriel, when she basically tells Frodo, "Hey, one of your group is going to try and steal the ring," and that turns out to be Boromir. But despite the fact that Boromir tries to steal the ring and almost does, the Fellowship gets ambushed by the Uruk-hai, which are basically orcs on steroids. And Boromir does the courageous thing, either that or Sean Bean just has it in a contract somewhere where he has to die in literally everything that he is in. Boromir sacrifices himself to protect the Fellowship and protect the ring. He goes out like a champion. But after that, the Fellowship pretty much goes their separate ways. Frodo and Sam go off to Mount Doom. Merry and Pippin get separated from the rest of the group. And Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas form a 6-man tag team to go and unite the other races against the coming invasion. I feel like I've spewed a lot of plot at all of you, and to that, I kind of apologize. But when it comes to Lord of the Rings, it is necessary, because when it comes to movies like this, they were said to be unfilmable for the longest time. When they came out in the 1950s, nobody thought that they could be made to a near faithful degree as they were. But then Peter Jackson basically pulled a line from a chorus line and said, I can do that. And despite the fact that Peter Jackson's filmography has been mixed at best since then, he will always and forever be remembered as the guy who made Lord of the Rings into what it is today. That is his legacy forever, and that's an insanely awesome legacy to have. I need to find an excuse one day to talk about The Two Towers and Return of the King, because somehow, some way, this trilogy gets even better with those movies. I don't need to tell you how successful this movie was, because it was insanely successful, both critically and financially. I think it was one of the highest grossing movies of that year. And its subsequent sequels, Two Towers and Return of the King, would see equal success both critically and financially, with Return of the King pulling all of the awards that it was nominated for at the Academy Awards, including Best Picture of 2003. When people think of epic fantasy movies, they either think of the biblical movies from the 1950s or The Lord of the Rings. During a time when fantasy movies were really not doing all that well at the box office, just for perspective's sake, the same year this movie came out, the Dungeons and Dragons movie came out, with Jeremy Irons in it. Yes, that one. And without Lord of the Rings, fantasy movies wouldn't have nearly the respect that they do now. If you all made it through all that, I am truly grateful. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching. Next time on the AFI project, I'm going to be taking a look at an epic movie, but in a different genre. It's an epic musical. It's from director Robert Wise and Jerome Robbins, and it is called West Side Story. But if you like this video, please be sure to leave a like, comment your thoughts down below, and if you like this video and you want to see more like it, hit the subscribe button and click the bell to allow notifications. That way, when a new video drops, you'll be the first to know about it. My name is Ryan Cam, and I'll see you in the next one.